Welcome to the special board meeting of West Basin Municipal Water District, March 28th at 10 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. Mr. General Manager, do we have a quorum, or please call the roll?
Director Tommy Favai. Here. Director Desi Alvarez.
Here.
Director Scott Houston. Director Don Deere.
Here.
President Gloria Gray.
Here. Thank you.
Madam President, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 3 is public comment. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak from the public?
Madam President, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak under public comment, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And Madam President, I do not see any requests for public comment.
All right, thank you. Item 4, presentations. Do we have any presentations? I see none. Item 5, action calendar. We have no action item. Item 6, information calendar. 6A, Mr. General Manager, would you please present that item?
Yes, thank you very much, President Gray. Good morning, and thank you all for being here with us today as we kick off our fiscal year 2025-2026 budget adoption process. For today's presentation, we do have 3 primary presenters, so we do have staff on hand in case any questions are being asked. First and foremost, we have Wendy O'Kelly, our Chief Financial Officer. We'll have myself, Erica Owens, our Assistant General Manager, and Matt Vey, our Water Policy and Resources Development Manager. So I guess we have 4 presenters. Also in the room today, we do have Barca Masurlian, our Executive Manager of Engineering and Operations, as well as Daryl Ramos Young, who is our previous Acting Manager of Communications. On Monday, he'll begin his new role as our full-time Manager of Communications. So that's the team that we have for you today as we introduce our budget. And we'll jump into the presentation and go to the second slide of the presentation. So what we have for you here today is your agenda. Again, we'll be reviewing the workshop schedule. Next, we'll be reviewing our challenges and opportunities. These were presented last year, and we thought we'd bring these back so that you can take a look at where we were last year and some of the things that we were thinking about before we get through our projections as far as how we did with that budget. The budget versus the fiscal year 24-25 projections. Then we'll get into the key budget drivers. These are issues that you're going to want to be thinking about as we contemplate a new budget. And then we'll take a brief look at our proposed expenses for the 2025-2026 fiscal year. And I say a brief look because we've now been able to collect all of those requests and recommendations from all of our department managers. As we noted last year, that first round is something that we hope to work on, sharpen our pencil, and bring back in detail line item discussions for that second workshop. So if we can go to the next slide. As you can see here, March 28th, our first workshop here today. I mentioned that we'll have a couple more workshops. Workshop number 2 is currently scheduled for April 26th. At that time, we'll review the fiscal year 25-26 proposed detailed budget revenues, expenses, and proposed rates. And I mentioned that because I thought last year the discussions that we had in relation to the budget and each department, what we're hoping to achieve, how we hope to achieve those items, and then the related fiscal impacts. I thought that was a great discussion, collecting feedback from each of the directors so that before our third and final budget workshops, we can hone in and get to where I think the board will be happy or at least have a budget in hand that they can contemplate adopting. You can see here that we do have a customer and stakeholder workshop. We hope to schedule this in May, depending on the conversations at budget workshop 1 and 2. And the reason for that is that if we're going to be adopting a budget in June, we really want to get to our retailers with enough time for them to provide feedback. I know that most of you know that we have not received a tremendous amount of uh, feedback or interaction when it comes to our budget. But I strive every year to get that information to them. I last year made several individual phone calls throughout the budget workshop process to solicit feedback. Got some, which I was able to deliver to the board, but we're going to do that same thing. They're extremely busy. I do recognize that, but I know that they do have thoughts as far as our programs, our projects, and ultimately our budget. You can see that on May 23rd, we do have workshop number 3 scheduled. That's our detailed CIP and R&R and funding options. Again, last year, I thought that was a great conversation where we had some of the needs of our facility distribution system and really get a feel for what the priorities of the agency were, and then identify funds and opportunities to pay for those. And here you can see at the very bottom, early June, we hope to bring a final proposal at a future workshop where the board of directors can contemplate and ask final questions. That allows staff some time to sharpen our pencil before that final adoption, which is required by the end of the month of June. So next slide. So this is the slide that we presented to the board of directors last year, talking about our challenges and opportunities. There you can see that at that time, we'd seen significantly lower potable water demand, decreasing the district's revenue. I think even for our newest director, everybody's heard that in our last fiscal year, we achieved the lowest potable demand or sales in West Basin history, getting close to that 80,000 acre feet during the year. Secondly, we saw trending operations and maintenance costs increasing. This has been a commonality year in and year out based off of the COVID epidemic, as well as the Hyperion upset. Third was the recycled water agreements were not recovering our costs and they were expiring. And fourth, net revenue was not sufficient to cover CIP and R&R projects. You might recall that we had done a recycled water master plan looking at all of the needs of the facility and potential for expansion. We also had a pretty thick list of projects that were needed at ECL. And so all of those things were kind of weighing on us last year when we adopted the budget. But we also highlighted several opportunities. And I want to bring these up because I want to give you a little look at how we were able to tackle that. First and foremost, recycled water agreements were scheduled for renewal. We were able to extend all of those agreements, at least if not in writing, with handshake deals for them to continue making all of their fixed payments. And you'll really see the impact of that as we get through the results of this current fiscal year. Secondly, the cost of service was underway. It was completed, and we immediately started utilizing that information, not only with our negotiations with all of our refineries, but of course, in our discussions with the city of Los Angeles. And for the first time ever, we were able to recoup some of our losses and expenses over amounts collected with the city of Los Angeles because of that cost of service study. And third and foremost was our readiness to serve charge. Due to our declining sales, we actually lost money in our last 2 fiscal years because we were simply budgeting well above and beyond what we saw as far as our water sales go. And that's a simple pass-through at Metropolitan Water District. So to lose money on a pass-through, it was really difficult for the agency. We've actually fixed that with a very conservative approach to budgeting. And again, you'll see that in the slides ahead. Next slide. So the key takeaways, our potable water sales are higher than budgeted. We did go with a very conservative approach of 80,000 acre feet after seeing about 83,000, I think last year, kind of bottoming out. We've actually seen a rebound from that very significant drought. That if you look at our sales and where they're at, and you combine that with groundwater pumping in the region, it's a pretty real rebound after that drought. So brings to our attention the need to really drive that message home as far as water use efficiency and conservation. We're not where we want to be yet. Second, our recycled water sales. The budgeted amount is tracking with projections. We are very close to our budgeted sales. I'm very proud of that. it's something that we've stressed to all of our operations team, as well as the team there at ECL with Veolia. Going through the RFP process, it was a big part of the conversation with each of the firms that we're proposing. We want to see us track above where we budget as far as our sales go, and I'm very pleased with where we are. Third, our operations and maintenance expenses are much lower than budgeted. I'm very proud of that as well. Really trying to find opportunities to cut costs, reworking all of those chemical agreements, and really looking at all of the maintenance aspects of the facility and trying to find new ways to reduce our expenses. And fourth, our salary and benefits. The cost of employees continues to rise, and we'll have our CFO touch on that today. Just the cost of our medical insurance premiums, most notably, but really looking and evaluating each specific staff position. We do have our budget for 52 FTEs in this past fiscal year budget. We'll talk about that a little bit later in this presentation and then in our next presentation. But we do not expect to see 52 FTEs in our next budget. We're hoping to be at 50. And that you'll see some savings despite that increasing cost of our employees. So if we turn to our next slide, as we begin to intro into the financial overview, I'm going to hand it off to our Chief Financial Officer, Wendy Oakdale.
Good morning, Madam President, Directors, Board of Directors. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you and acknowledge those who are here with us and then also joining us online. But I also want to say thank you to Eric, EJ, and Matt as well, who worked through this process with me. And of course, all the managers and West Basin staff who contributed to the financial data contained in our presentation for you today. But most of all, I do want to acknowledge my staff, Stephanie Clemente Finley, Sandra Ruiz, and Stephanie Soto. Without hesitation, my staff provided me with various reports and documentation, and they answered countless questions that I had for the last 2 months. So thank you all again and appreciate your support. With that, in today's work, I'm going to walk you through the results of our budget to projection performance, covering the fiscal year 24-25 budget and year-end projections and referencing the 23-24 actuals. The goal of this presentation for you today is to provide a clear comparison between our planned financial outcomes and the projected results. I'll highlight any significant variances for you, both favorable, unfavorable, and explain key factors that contributed to those financial results and differences. This analysis as well will help us all better understand West Basin's financial position and how we can optimize our financial strategies as we move forward. Now, beginning on page 7, West Basin's revenue is primarily driven by sales of imported water and recycled water. For fiscal year 24-25, the budgeted sales of potable water were set at 80,000 acre feet. However, we're projecting an increase of 5,793 above that budgeted amount. This will have a positive impact on our revenue. And similarly, you can see the same trend in the Dominguez Gap barrier and then also in the West Coast barrier, where we're seeing the sales are exceeding budgeted expectations. So these increases are some of the key factors in our revenue performances. And then below, the projections for recycled water sales are slightly lower than the budget amount for fiscal year 24-25. And it's worth noting that we are seeing an increase compared to the previous fiscal year, as you see on the slide for 23-24. This positive trend indicates that notwithstanding the slight shortfall against the budget, the overall growth in recycled water sales remains a key strength for this fiscal year as well. And on page 8 in the presentation, just to revisit again the increase in potable water sales against the reliability charge, we're anticipating for the reliability service charge to be 1.76 million higher than the initial budgeted number. This increase further reflects that positive outcome for the higher than expected sales in our potable water sales. And then just to review recycled water sales volume with revenues on page 8. In the current fiscal year as well, projections, we are at, we are looking at a complex calculation here for the projection of total water sales as it relates to our financial results for recycled water. This $2.7 million variance, I just want to explain, consists of multiple rates. And it has additional contributing factors like mid-year rate increases from MWD's base charge. So at first glance, it's logical to see that because sales are down by 182 acre feet, that revenue should also trend down as well. However, I want to note that the revenue increases in the operating sale are not conclusive. And what I'd like to do is come back to the board, and I would like to look at the fiscal year 24-25 budget, break that down by those individual recycled water rates, and then compare it to the projection that we have broken down so we can see where that variance lies. So look for that more detailed to be presented in workshop number 2. But however, looking at the same slide, if you look at the operating expenses, the results do show that staff has been diligently monitoring and managing those costs. And as a result, we are projecting a reduction of nearly $408,000 in the recycled water expenses. This proactive approach has been effective in keeping these recycled water sales under control. And then next on page 10 of the presentation are the results of our investment income and other revenues. The estimated return on investments for this fiscal year is projected to increase by a nominal amount, but it represents about 3.9% total return. And then in the second section, you'll see some of our other revenues, standby revenue, grants, partner funds, and then refinery fixed charges. So the standby revenue is at local tax that's levied and is projected as budgeted for this year. And then also as far as our grants and partner funds with the updated slide, that is also projected to budget. The projection is at budget as well. But then looking at refinery fixed charges, there is an increase of $5.39 million. And that's the fixed charges that pay the ongoing major repair and replacement costs. And so the favorable results are due to a conservative approach, not only included with the refinery agreements, or that includes those refinery agreements from last year's budget.
Wendy, if I could jump in there, when we brought our budget to you last year, the revenue that we projected was all related to agreements that were in place at that time. And with expiring agreements, we knew that some work needed to be done. And so we did not include that potential new revenue beyond those agreements. We took a very conservative approach, and then working with our refineries, we were able to extend those fixed charges. And I definitely want to say thank you to the team. I know that Barker McSerlin's been working directly with the Torrance Refinery. Eric Owens has been working with Marathon Refinery. A whole team of us have been working with Chevron, all with the hope of extending those fixed payments beyond the life of those previous agreements as we seek to utilize the cost of service study to enter into new agreements. Especially now that we have a potential or a new firm coming in, we have a better understanding what our O&M expenses will be in this next year. We believe that that'll help us extend those agreements for this next 5-year period. But all of that revenue that you see there, that 5.3 million or roughly 5.4 million, that was all, I think, due to the hard work of the West Basin team working with those refineries.
So on slide page 11 of the presentation, these are noteworthy expenses, and under labor and benefits, as EJ mentioned earlier, the district came in under budget by $201,000. Here you'll see there were a few vacancies in this fiscal year, but also what played a key role was that about 11% increase in medical premiums that we saw in 22-23, and then also in 23-24. Then additionally, what we pay out every single year in our obligation is our unfunded accrued liabilities, may not have been in that number as well, but that is paid out every year additionally. So it is in the projections. And that's about $300,000 that we pay annually. And with that, I'll hand it over to Eric Owens for the CIP section.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, on that second row there, board, we would just like to point out that, you may recall that the 10-year CIP plan has a projected budget for fiscal year 24-25 of about $42 million. You'll recall from last year's budget establishment that we identified about $12 million of cash at the end of the budget process that we would have available to pay for CIP. And there was much discussion about retaining a commercial or a line of credit in order to pay for that remaining balance. Well, with the emphasis this past year on concluding the Palos Verdes lateral pipeline, which makes up the lion's share of that $14 million that we are projecting to spend this year. We've got that project. Of course, we have begun emphasizing two projects, the DCS upgrade, which we're still very early in the process and haven't spent a lot of money towards that yet, as well as the solids handling. Those make up a portion of that $14 million. But again, those projects are still early on, and much of those expenses will hit in latter years. And so that $14 million, I do think, represents staff taking board's direction on the projects that you've authorized over this past year and keeping them moving forward. So as a consequence, though, of the variance between the 10-year CIP amount of $42 million, you do see that variance of $28 million. However, I would remind you that we identified $12 million in this current budget for cash available for the CIP, and we are trending just above that. And as you're going to hear throughout this presentation, we do not expect to need to take that line of credit out to pay for that difference of 12 million and 14 million.
And just to echo that, Eric, we heard the board loud and clear, and I do want to say thank you to the board of directors, recognizing that with the facility as finally aged as ours is, you can never tell. We need to be prepared for anything at this point. So having that line of credit, the commercial paper program is important to this process, but I've heard the board of directors that they do not want to utilize it. So we are taking all precautions as far as planning and doing everything that we can to put forward a budget where no additional debt will be needed. So I just want to stress that. Back over.
Okay, for the next slide for debt coverage on page 12, your handout or presentation. It's important to measure how we are positioned to meet our debt obligations. So given the current financial performance, including positive trends in potable water sales and proactive cost management, we are on track in the short term to meet our obligations. And you'll see that in this number here. For fiscal year 24-25, there is a 1.79 debt coverage. And we'll, again, in later slides, help you understand why that is. So our net revenues are 38.6 million, which is a 3.2 million up from the budgeted amount. And then for the next slide, revenues, this is the comparison of the fiscal year 24-25 budget versus the 24-25 projections. And again, this is all for revenues. And some of the notable categories to highlight include imported water sales, fixed revenue charges, and then the recycle O&M reimbursements. And there's two, the imported water sales. As we saw in the previous slide, the water sales are projected to increase by 5,793 acre feet in this year. This reflects that upward trend in demand and sales volume, contributing positively to our overall revenue numbers. And then also at the bottom, the 4.6 million fixed revenue charges. Again, EJ had kind of drawn that out. It's important to note that there was a significant increase in this category based on what we previously budgeted for. And so overall for revenues, we are anticipating 15 million more in revenues than initially budgeted for in 24-25. And then turning to the next slide, we have the expenses for budgeted versus projections for 24-25. And this section outlines the anticipated operating costs along with any adjustments that the board may have made during fiscal year 24-25 to the original budget. So the major variance we're seeing in this operating cost section is associated with imported water, which has increased beyond the initial projections by 13.2 million. And then overall, you can see that difference is 11 million. So from budgeted 220.7 million in total expenses at the beginning of the year, where we are projecting to end is 232.5 or 0.6 at the end of the year, which is a variance of 11.8 million. And I just want to move to the slide so you can see how that looks, the next slide against each other.
Before you do that, if I could just touch on this, this is something that I really want to highlight because I want to give credit to all of the West Basin managers and staff members. I felt that when we proposed our final budget to the board of directors last year, that we had gone through line by line to find opportunities to reduce and cut while still maintaining all of the services at a very, I would say, best level that we could. And when you make a cut and you reduce a line item, you're reducing the service, not only to our retailers, but to our customers. So to really come in below budget, I think shows that from top to bottom, bottom to top, everybody's taking that message very seriously. Looked at every opportunity to cut costs while still maintaining not only the services to our customers and communities, but also to the West Basin staff and team internally. And then I wanted to also note that you can see obviously the 13 million variance in the imported water. As Wendy said, when you sell more water, you need to buy more water. So that's there. And then there's another one that, you can't take all the positives when it comes to negatives, because on the water use efficiency, when you come under budget on water use efficiency, that means you're not spending. And most of our conservation programs are funded through MAA funds and grant programs. So when you come under budget, that means that our programs are being utilized less than we hoped that they would be, because a lot of those are rebates and programs like that. So while it looks good up there to see under budget, we always hope to be spending as much as we can on our community when it comes to water use efficiency. So I just wanted to highlight those issues.
So overall, excuse me, on the next slide, our year-end projections with that 249.57 projected revenues against the 232.58 projected expenses, we have a variance of 6.994.
16.
16, thank you so much. 16.994 budgeted more, and this is the net positive number for our year-end projections. And then turning to the key budget drivers. So to begin, the proposed budget for 25-26, starting with the key budget drivers, they are expected to have a significant impact on our financial results in the upcoming budget cycle. And these drivers play both internal and external, a critical role in shaping our budget performance. So for us, it's crucial to understand and help explain the variances we've observed in the budget to actual comparison, and then also that offers valuable insight into areas that require us to focus in on the next fiscal year. So we're going to dive deeper into these key budget drivers and examining those underlying causes and how they align with our long-term strategic objectives. On page 17, you'll see the 7 key.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to add 2 to this list that I thought about last night, but Go ahead.
17, you'll see
Yeah.
7, and then we'll talk about an 8th budget driver for 25, 26. And just briefly, I'll go through the Met rate increase for January and 25, and then also January 2026. Number 2, fluctuations in recycled and potable water demands. There are 5. Number 3, refinery agreements that are up for negotiation. And then 4, we are monitoring fiscal policies and changes that present additional economic impacts. And 5, inflationary impacts and effects. And then the new O&M agreement is another driver increasing production and decreasing expenses. And finally, 7, staff is making concerted efforts and continues to make concerted efforts to reduce expenses.
Yes, and I will begin schedule meetings with each of the board of directors to talk about these next 2 issues because I really want to make sure that all questions are answered and we can kind of set up the discussion, for fruitful discussions, I think, in the summer. One of the things that we need to really talk about is the building and our office location. It's something that so far I haven't really seen us talk about as far as what impact that'll have on this budget, but I need to have a further discussion with our team and then at least begin those discussions during this budget, maybe work through the ad hoc over the summer and kind of come to some resolution when it comes to that. Secondly, I also want to note that throughout our budget process, and we talked about having a better than we were expecting year, we are still keeping our eye on that 2030 drop off when it comes to our standby charge. So everything that we do now impacts us as far as being able to withstand that drop off in 2030. Yes, we do have our debt dropping off a little bit by then as well. But if you go back just 3 years ago and you look at the projected rate increases that we were going to have to withstand as we prepared for that, I think we're in a much better place to get there. But for as far as the West Basin team in front of you, we're always keeping our eye on how we're going to be prepared to take that hit in 2030. So I'll throw that back over to Wendy.
These next 2 slides, I'll hand it over to Matt Bay for next points.
Thank you. Good morning, directors. So the first key budget driver that I'll be touching on is related to our Metropolitan Water District imported water rates. I think the board is pretty aware that imported water makes up a very large proportion of our budget, with about 2/3 of our revenues and a little over 60% of our total expenses. And so last year, as part of its biennial budget and rates process, Metropolitan Water District's board did adopt back-to-back rate increases. The first one took effect in January of this year, and then the next one will in the next January. Those overall increases were 8.5%. This year, 8.5% next year, but for West Basin's specific perspective, we only purchase treated water. And so the treated water rate increases were actually 11% for this year, and then an additional 10% for next year. And just to remind kind of the board that when West Basin does increase its rates, and this was certainly the case last year, the majority of that rate increase impact does fall or is due in large part to the increase in the Metropolitan Water District rates. Yes, we did have an increase in our reliability service charge, but when you look at the overall picture, what's really driving that rate increase was the Metropolitan rate increase. And so West Basin staff is tracking the Metropolitan Water District budget very closely right now. I know that our 2 directors on the Met board are also. Something else that's going to happen this year, likely will happen this year. It might not impact the next fiscal year budget, but Metropolitan is looking at treated water cost recovery. And right now it's volumetric, but they're looking at instituting some sort of change to that where it could go to part volumetric, part fixed. And so those decisions will be made by the board hopefully this year, but those will all have impacts on all of the member agencies, including West Basin in the future. And so again, what we know for now is that our treated water rates will go up by 10% next year, and that will have an impact on our budget in 25, 26. Next slide. Okay, so the next couple slides, I'll talk just about our sales and kind of some of the trends that we've been seeing. And so I think the board knows that predicting kind of our retail potable sales over the past few years has been somewhat challenging for us. I look back the last 15 years and prior to 22, 23, we had consistently been between 103,000 acre feet and 110,000 acre feet. So for almost a 15-year period, we were very, very consistent with that. Now, there were things happening during that time when groundwater sales were, or groundwater production was dropping off, but we were also seeing increase in the conservation, which kind of led to those levels being somewhat consistent during that time. But what's really happened, and what you can see in the chart here, is that a couple years ago, we were coming out of that major drought. Conservation had really taken hold. So our demand was dropping, but we also were seeing an increase or a rebound in our groundwater production that had hit a low in 2019. And so because of that, we really saw a large drop in sales in 22, 23, and then also in 23, 24. Last year alone, we saw an increase of almost 5,000 acre feet in our groundwater production. And so West Basin, essentially with Metropolitan and all member agencies likely, we're really kind of chasing that demand down the past few years. So again, just to give you context, we saw a 20,000 acre foot decrease over the past 2 years. So of course, what happens is when you budget higher, but your actuals are coming in lower, it does hit your bottom line. And so that's really what happened to us the past 2 fiscal years. However, this year, thanks to the foresight of this board of directors to take a little more of a conservative approach, both here and at Metropolitan Water District, this year we finally caught up to that demand with our projections. And so it's why we are seeing those higher than budgeted revenues this year. So looking forward, it's kind of an inflection point here. Are we going to continue to see a little bit of a rebound? Could we go back down if we, continue to see conservation? We are a year further out from that conservation message that's not really there right now. But we also continue to see that increased groundwater production. We continue to have conversations with our retailers about investments in groundwater. So these are some of the things that we're going to have to wrestle with this year as part of this budget process. And then I'll move to slide 20. And this is related to our recycled water sales and versus budget. So again, if you kind of look at the past 7 years that we have here, recycled water sales have somewhat regularly been lower than budgeted. And if you really kind of look at the stark one there in the middle in FY 21-22, that was really the result of the Hyperion incident that occurred that really affected our production at that time. But that's continued to have some lingering effects the past 4 fiscal years. And I think we can say that staff has definitely made some progress in FY 22-23 and FY 23-24. But we are still seeing some of those lingering effects of the Hyperion upset and some continued volatility of that water source quality that we're getting at ECL. So the good news is that staff has really been working hard to boost production, especially at the berry we're seeing this year. And that hard work has paid off to where our budgeted sales this year are essentially being met, meeting our goals for the year so far. Obviously, there's a whole list of factors in play when it comes to the fiscal health or position of our recycled water operations. But from a sales forecasting versus actual production standpoint, I think staff is optimistic that we've turned a corner in being able to better predict and meet our budgeted goals. But of course, we'll continue to be impacted by the source quality that we're getting at. With that, I'll turn it back over to Eric.
Go to the next slide. All right, directors, this key budget driver is, of course, related to the recycled water agreements and the cost of service analysis. As you recall, in January, we brought before this board the results of a memo using the FY25 budgeted amounts to determine the cost of service. This, of course, has prompted us through our negotiations with several of the refineries whose contracts expired this year to alert them to the cost issues that we've been seeing, and of course is playing a major role in our renegotiation of those contracts. Specifically, what we are talking about is for the Chevron nitrification facility, That contract terminated or expired in September of 2024. We are actively working on renegotiating that contract with the refinery. And it's asterisked because they are currently on a month-to-month contract under the old terms. And as Wendy and EJ have both pointed to, our fixed refinery fees have been higher than budgeted this year. And that's because each of these refineries that expired this year, whether they are on the month-to-month or whether they have extended that contract, they've agreed to continue paying that fixed amount for the entirety of this fiscal year. And of course, we hadn't budgeted for that because we couldn't assume that that was going to be the case. And so you've seen previously in one of Wendy's slides that number has significantly increased. Additionally, the Torrance refinery customer, their contract has been extended through 8/31/2025. We are working to renegotiate that contract ideally before the close of this fiscal year, but we do have a few more months available to us to make that happen. Marathon here actually expired in January of 2025. We did extend that through June of 2025. And again, those two refineries have agreed to continue making their fixed payments. All other contracts are pretty well into the future, or at least not necessarily anytime soon. And so as a consequence, next year's budget will be based on negotiations with the 3 refineries for 5 waters that we are actively working on right now. So we don't necessarily have the crystal ball as to where we're going to land, but that is one of the budget drivers that we expect to impact next year's budget process. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it back to Wendy.
Another one of those key budget drivers is the investment market on page 22. And with insight from our partnership with Chandler Asset Management, this section offers an update on the current economic and market conditions. So as we look at the market conditions, there are several key factors to consider. Slower growth in 2025. That economic growth is expected to slow down in 2025, which will have implications on both investment returns and then overall financial performance. Then there's also greater market uncertainty. So we're anticipating this greater uncertainty in markets, primarily driven by the effects of uncertain fiscal policy at the state and federal level. This could lead to increased volatility in investment returns. And then number 3, inflationary trends. Inflation continues to be a factor, according to our investment management company, to watch, as ongoing inflationary pressures can both impact our costs and expenses, as well as our investment yields. And then the labor market as well. The labor market remains a crucial area to consider because while there's signs of stabilization, there are still job shortages and wage pressures that may also impact that economic growth and cost across various sectors as well. And then on page 23, this graph shows the basin's, the district's reserves over the past 3 fiscal years. Well, you could see in 21-22, we had 82 million in reserves. And then that number went from 72.5 million. And then for fiscal year 23-24, it's 76.538 million in reserves. Also, on that next line, it's the average daily spending, which is an indication of that inflation. You could start to see that average daily spending is increasing. This past fiscal year, we're looking at 1.14 million. The basin has spent on an average, and that takes our cash on hand, which is an indicator of cash flow or liquidity, down to 60 days cash on hand. And then when we look at that and factor that into our debt coverage ratio, we're looking previously at 1.36 and now it's 1.32. So this is just an indicator how those investment inflation will impact also our debt coverage ratio. And then the next slide, we'll talk about the O&M contract.
So directors, you've already seen a version of this graph, actually, I think just last Monday in the presentation regarding the new operations and maintenance contract with Jacobs. And we just wanted to highlight that, the preliminary numbers that you're going to see for the fiscal year 26 O&M budget are based on our previous method of budgeting, which is really looking at last year's costs. And they don't yet have the benefit of the potential savings that we're going to see in the O&M contract. And that, of course, that's because when staff needed to present those budget numbers to Wendy, we hadn't yet finalized the contract or had it approved from the board. And so what I would fully expect by the time that we begin to discuss the recycled water O&M costs for next year, we will incorporate the expected savings from that new contract structure. And as a reminder from Monday's presentation, we expect that to be somewhere between $3 and $6 million compared to what we spent this past year, what we expect to spend. And as shown on the bottom line of this slide, I say between 3 and 6 because you'll remember that we do have a 10% contingency on this contract value of $31.5 million. The total approval from the board is something closer to $34 million. So of course, if the unknown activities necessary for during fiscal year 26 require us to spend much of that $3 million contingency, then our total contract value might be closer to $34 million, reducing that potential savings as shown here. So again, right now, it's a little bit murky just yet until we have the new operator on site and operating and maintaining the facility. But we are very optimistic and hopeful about the overall costs associated with the recycled water system, not just the operator's cost, but all of those potential savings we're going to see in energy and chemical, and ultimately drive that budget number down. So with that, I'll hand it back.
And when you're real quick, you saw in the presentation, we don't need to go back there, but if you want to make note, slide 9, it talked about our operating revenues and operating expenses when it comes to our recycled water program. And you can see that after the Hyperion upset and of course COVID, we have done everything that we can to see that reduction in our operating expenses. So it has come down. Are working with our retail customers and the refineries. You've seen the revenues increase, and we've drastically reduced that budgeted and planned loss on our recycled water program. Significant impact when it comes to the planned loss that we expected. And with this agreement moving forward, we believe that we're getting ever so close to making our recycled water program really efficient and run at a pace and economically viable for the future. And so again, I just want to say thank you to the entire team, everybody that's working with our operators and really working to reduce our costs at every level. This agreement is going to make a significant difference. So I just want to point that out before I hand it back.
Page slide 25. So these 7 key budget drivers all highlight the need to carefully manage our cash flow and then the long-term financial strategy. And this slide it basically shows you the schedule for our debt obligation payments. And so while we have a $231.78 million debt obligation, about $43.9 million of that is coming from standby revenues, which is what you see in that last column. And the reason why it stops at 2030, as EJ and I believe Eric mentioned, is that's the time it's scheduled to sunset. The following year in 2031, we do see that annual payments start to go down by $3 million, but that is still a significant amount of debt obligation that the basin will have out there. Just once again, pointing to our need to be strategic and make a concerted effort for this new budget year.
And for our newest director, I just want to say this is a new slide that we started adding to our budget presentations last year, shining a light on our outstanding, also on that standby charge issue, because when we talk about adopting budgets, and I mentioned this earlier, keeping our eye on that 2030 fiscal year, because we know we're going to have that significant drop off. It's important that we continue to focus in on that because we don't want to see that impact our communities and our retailers. Without proper planning, you're going to see a significant rate spike in that timeframe that would be a pretty significant impact. And so planning ahead and being, I think, conservative as far as our budgeting approach, but also our spending will help us get to where we want to be at that time.
Okay, so the next slide, as we move into the next steps for fiscal year 25-26 with the board's direction, we are continuing to develop those, those categories for 25-26 for the proposed budget. In the meantime, it's more important to note on page 27, if you look at our fiscal year 24-25 projections that we outlined for you in previous slides, I summarized it here for you, comparing to the adopted budget, but then also giving you that kind of snapshot look at what we're reviewing right now for fiscal year 25-26, and that's in that final column. And so you can see just the different departments and the different programs and where we're landing. You're looking at a $69.2 million budget as we sit today. We still need to finesse that number. There are some other categories that are not included in this slide presentation. We did not have the debt service add, the loss on, you see that fourth from the fifth from the bottom up, WRD West Coast Barrier, and then also CIP is not factored into this number because we are still building on fiscal year 25 proposed operating expenditures and revenues, and we'll be bringing that detailed information once again back to you in workshop 2 on April 26th.
And Wendy, if I could just touch on just a few issues. First, on our public information, you can see from the adopted budget of 24-25, there is a pretty significant increase when it comes to our proposed budget in the next year. We're still working on this, but I wanted to note that I have had the opportunity to speak with the board president and then, of course, our past president about West Basin hosting a policy forum or, for lack of a better word, an event really to educate our local leaders and stakeholders on issues related to the Bay Delta, our imported water supplies, including the Colorado River, and then also a little bit of a discussion on lessons learned. And so with that being formulated and kind of working with the board of directors, we did put a proposed budget in there for us to work through that, but we need to fine tune that with the board of directors as far as what the scope would be and the magnitude would be. And then, of course, working with our other stakeholders as far as potential sponsorships, as far as how we reduce that cost, but we did include that in this budget. Secondly, I wanted to also note that there's a significant amount of money in the water policy and resources development budget, the proposed budget. It's a great reminder right now that we are looking at the next fiscal year and our state required urban water management plan. And that is a significant undertaking. To me, that document is the yellow brick road of West Basin Municipal Water District as far as our water supply and our strategies to meet our future demand. And we are undertaking a slightly different approach this year with our urban water management plan, working with our individual retailers. Each individual retailer and wholesaler is required to produce their own urban water management plan. We've been working with our municipalities, including the city of Inglewood, El Segundo, Lomita, and Manhattan Beach, as far as working with them and possibly doing the undertaking of an urban water management plan for them, where they would contribute to that. But that is a pretty significant cost on West Basin in this next fiscal year. So I wanted to highlight those two items.
And the next slide, slide 28, it's just a repeat of the proposed operating expenses. I've just added 2 categories just for consistency, continuity, transparency. You will see this slide updated in workshop number 2 with any adjustments that EJ just discussed that we may be making to the 25-26 number as we propose to you today. And then as we move forward through the workshops, we'll again, in subsequent workshops for the final proposed budget, you'll see that column start to fill in as well.
For the board of directors, I really want to stress that the proposed numbers that you see there, West Basin staff we'll be reviewing them line by line. And of course, bringing that back. Workshop 2 is just that. We'll be introducing all of the proposed departmental budgets, and each department manager will be providing an overview of all of those expenses, so you get a better feel for exactly what each line item and program and project are. And so we're looking forward to doing that, but we want to show you kind of that baseline of where we're starting, and then we'll work from there.
And slide 29, just to reiterate, April 26th at 11 a.m. we'll be conducting workshop number two for fiscal year 25-26. We're back with that proposed detailed budget for revenues, expenses, and rates. And then customer and stakeholder workshop will be conducted in May. And then workshop number 3 for CIP, R&R, and funding options on May 23rd. And then finally, that final budget rates and charges will be determined in early June. And so that concludes workshop number 1, our budget presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Lynn.
And thank you, staff, for the presentation. Are there any questions? Director Deere,
No, thank you.
Director Alvarez.
Well, I don't have any questions per se. I have some comments. First, want to thank everybody for all of the savings that have been realized in this year's budget. And I am looking forward to the further refinement of the budget for O&M operations. I think it will be hopefully, well, I know it will be better than what's shown right now and just the projection, but it will be substantial. And with respect to the 10% contingency, I hope we never use it. But, I reticently vote to agree to that, but I prefer not to ever have the contingencies available, because if we don't have them available, we don't use them. I do want to talk a little bit about our budget and recognize that we still have some problematic areas. Our overall revenue, if you exclude our imported water sales, are $80,679,000. And that's from page 13 or slide 13. And our overall expenses, if you exclude water purchases, imported water purchases, are $89 million. So that's a $9 million deficit that we continue to incur that's being covered by charges off of our imported water sale. But really looking at that, and the gentleman who spoke to it, we do have to be very mindful of continuing to be concerned about our expenditures. Because the standby charge revenue was $5.7 million. If you subtract that, then our real revenues, exclusive of imported water sales, were $75 million approximately. Our expenses were still $89 million. So when we lose that, now those standby charges go up for the next 3 years, and then they disappear, period. So it's a much bigger issue than I think we keep in mind, because it's something that's in the background, but it really needs to be something that we're very cognizant with, because in adopting budgets, at some point, all of a sudden, the revenue disappears. We actually will benefit from it next year, because the standby charge will go up by about $2 million, but then it does go away a couple of years after that. Those are my comments for now. I may have something else at the end. Thank you, President Gray.
Thank you very much. Director Fabai.
Yes, I got a couple of comments. Thank you, Director Gray. This is for Eric. I just wanted to clarify on page 21. when it comes to the Chevron, nitrification agreement. You mentioned that, of course, it's expired already, but you mentioned, do they actually make payments every month, although this agreement is expired?
Yes, that's correct, Director. So they have agreed to continue the terms of the previous agreement, which of course includes a volumetric rate that they pay every month based on how much water they take, as well as a fixed payment that is simply built into the previous contract.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And then my last question is to EJ. On page 27. When it comes to category district other costs, can you give an explanation on that, EJ, when it comes to other costs for the district?
I'm gonna look to our CFO because I don't know exactly what was incorporated into that.
Some of the other cost, Director, okay, is that it's gonna be things like memberships, and it will be just overhead as well, that we allocate from the district. So those are just anything over and beyond. I want to say that maybe even some of the internal utilities accounts are in there. So it's really more of a allocation or a category to hold all those common costs that are shared by the district.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's it. Director Gray.
All right, thank you. EJ, any further comments regarding the presentation?
No, I just really want to stress, and I think Director Houston will be reviewing this video. I, along with the entire team, we're happy to meet with each individual director to go over this. There's a lot of work to be done. I was very pleased, and again, I want to say thank you to the team here because a lot of work was put into this presentation, but we're not quite there yet. So we will be continuing at this pace, and as I've discussed with the team, it's all about our budget, rates, contracts, and production. So we're going to focus in on those four things. And I think that if we do, you're really going to see the results in the end.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you to the team, the budget team, everyone involved. Great presentation, a lot of information presented to the board today, and glad you're going to present it to Director Houston. Looking forward to the next board meeting, and thank you again. It was a very thorough and obviously very involved budget presentation this morning. So thank you to all. Director Alvarez, did I hear comments? Did you want comments?
Yeah, I do have a kind of a closing comment.
Sure, yeah.
And when we come back, you know, and looking at slides 27 and 28, it kind of sets up a proposed budget. And we haven't gone into the details of that. I do have issues with some of those areas. And I would like us not to believe that that is the budget that we're gonna see. I hope to see a better number than the number that you are right now anticipating. But I don't like, I want to just reiterate that we have a lot of. Thank you, President.
All right. Any other comments from any of the other directors before we close it out? All right. Again, thank you to the team. I know it was a lot of work involved in putting it together. So again, thank you for presenting this morning. You heard the comments from the board. And so with that, we'll go to the next item, which is director's comments and future agenda items. Any director? Let's start with Director Deere, please. Any comments?
No, thank
Any
you.
further comments? Thank
No
you,
further
Director.
comments.
All right, Director Alvarez.
I don't have any other comments. Thank you.
All right, Director Favive.
I just want to say thank you to all the staff for your hard work on this, and I know we're going to have budget meetings coming up, but thank you.
All right, my comments,
Madam
thank
President?
you. Yes,
Madam
yes,
President, can I add to that?
Yes.
Because earlier I made note of the team that would be presenting and providing information today. But Director Favai just reminded me that we can't have these meetings without our team helping us coordinate that. So Desiree Quintero, her team, including Hazel Vasquez and Kaya Yoshida, are here today on a Friday. This building is usually only occupied by a few of us on Friday. So to have the entire team here, I want to say thank you to them for helping us out.
thank you for including them because sometimes we forget that we do have a great administrative team and they're part of the entire team there and staff. So thank you all for being here and thank you for the very thorough, I thought, very informative presentation. And so with that, no further comments. We are adjourned. Thank you very much to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.